simply, we just don't have a lot of physical spaces to meet and to come together and to build leaders, to build a movement, to take collective action and to strategize on how we do it successfully.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Adam, you were out in Minneapolis last week for a work trip at a conference. Can you talk to us a little bit about what were some of the interesting things that you saw out there?
Yeah, I was in Minneapolis this week with a variety of labor and labor adjacent folks. Basically, people working on worker power throughout the country. And there were folks from, California, the Northeast, throughout the South, had a lot of brothers and sisters from Mississippi, which I was proud to see as a native Mississippian. And yeah, it was interesting to interact with folks from different states, hear some of their struggles. There were public sector, private sector, there were worker centers, there were adjacent nonprofits and other advocacy organizations that work alongside unions, right? So it was not just labor union folks, but folks working on worker power more broadly, people involved in cooperatives. So that was really cool. And something that really stood out to me was just when I go to things like this, or when I talk to folks from other areas, it really stands out how behind we are in Alabama and much of the South when it comes to movement ecosystem, movement infrastructure. In Minneapolis, they have a very strong labor council. They have strong labor councils throughout the state, a very active state federation for labor. And they also have all sorts of other, organizations kind of on the periphery that do a lot of different tasks, do a lot of different roles, and bring a lot of different kind of people into this labor movement to try to build a broad working class mass movement. I got a chance to spend time at a worker center in Minneapolis, actually just a short walk from where George Floyd was murdered. And of course, it was the anniversary recently this past week or two. And so, it was kind of a heavy time to be in that space and get a chance to speak to activists and organizers who've been on the ground for 5 years now. But the Worker Center was really interesting because as far as I know, we don't really have any worker centers anymore in the state of Alabama. And there are not very many in the Southeast generally. And worker centers are really cool because, it's a physical space, right? So workers, community activists, community groups can all actually use a physical space to meet, to train, to gather, break bread. But worker centers often work with unorganized workers, in many cases, immigrant workers in construction, retail, restaurants, agriculture, various sectors where there is low union density and high exploitation. And so it was really cool to get a chance to interact with folks from CETUL, CTUL, the Worker Center there, and hear about how they've kind of transitioned from a service model to a more organizing model. And, when they first, something that stood out to me is they talked about when they first started, they were very much in a service model. A worker would show up with a problem, the organizer would talk to them and then talk to a lawyer and then filter that back to the worker and basically tell them what to do and ask, come up with a game plan. Whereas they really tried to embrace mass organizing and leadership development in recent years. And, I think that is really huge. Ultimately, we need more working class leaders. And we are capable as working class people. There are brilliant folks all in every industry. There are people who could be true leaders in this labor movement, in this working class progressive movement. And so I really appreciate the emphasis on that leadership development. and getting folks from different industries, from different communities, to be willing to be bold and take risk and take collective action. And, as a result, they've been able to produce a lot of wins, right? They have put a lot of money back into the pockets of working people in the community, whether it's through fighting wage theft or, raising standards and wages, expanding unions. It's really exciting to see. And so, in Alabama, we're lacking these worker centers. Something else that stood out to me was that labor unions collectively had gone in together on a really big building. There's physical space, and it was, a significantly sized building, multi-story. And my understanding is over a dozen unions actually share the building. They have offices there. They have huge meeting areas, ability to bring community folks in when needed. And there again, that's a deficit that I think we're facing in the Southern movement in many states, where frankly, we just don't have a lot of physical spaces to meet and to come together and to do the kind of work that we want to do, to build leaders, to build a movement, to take collective action and to strategize on how we do that, how we do it successfully.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
I love getting to learn from other folks from other areas and see the way movements have developed. Obviously, Minneapolis is a big city. Minnesota is a big state compared to Alabama. And, something else that I noticed is that even Tennessee seems to have a more robust movement infrastructure, from a holistic approach compared to Alabama or Mississippi. And a lot of that, of course, can be credited to Nashville. So I've been thinking a lot, just reflecting on this trip. How do we build worker power in more rural areas, right? We can't just have strongholds in the big urban centers, right? That can't be the only place we're doing coalition building. That can't be the only place where we have, faith and labor tables. That can't be the only place where there are adjacent nonprofits who are, playing supporting roles to what the unions are trying to do. So that's something that's really been on my mind, reflecting on this trip is how do we, do that kind of coalition building, build the sort of infrastructure and leadership development in more rural areas where, it is more difficult to connect people, frankly, and to get people together. Especially when we lack public transportation. We have folks who are really spread out throughout the state. If you go outside of Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, Mobile, right, there are counties that are just sparsely populated. And so that's a issue I think we really have to wrestle with, is making sure that we are building power in more rural areas. But yeah, it was great to hear. I met a brother from UE Local 150. We just had UE President Carl Rosen on the show last week, and met someone from that local. And, as we mentioned last week, North Carolina has banned collective bargaining for public sector workers, but that hasn't stopped them from building a fighting union, a militant union that can actually produce wins, because they are able to take action together. They're able to build leadership from the rank and file working class. And that's really exciting. And so I think they're just, in summary, we have to have a lot more collaboration here in the South. Where unions exist, we have to be collaborating amongst ourselves a lot more and talking amongst ourselves a lot more, helping each other, strategizing together. But we also have to be working with the other, progressive allies and forces out there that can help us and should help us, whether that's faith allies, community groups, nonprofits, political folks. Because, of course, in Minnesota, they have advocates that they've been able to elect to office. They have politicians that are willing to go to the mat for working class issues. And, that's not to say their politicians are perfect by any means, but clearly they have done some things that we have not been able to achieve yet. And so that,
Right.
I feel good about
Yeah.
it. I feel hopeful about it, but it definitely dawns on me that we have a lot of work ahead here in the South.
If anybody has any thoughts on, what ways that unions can be building in the South, we'd obviously love to hear it. 844-899-TVLR, and you can leave us a voicemail at any time throughout the week at that number. That's 844-899-8857. We do have a caller on the line, and then we'll get to our interview with the painters here in just a second. Got to be quick, but we do have a caller from a 510 area code. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air. 510 area code, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Zach Hyden. Hey, guys. How y'all doing?
Hey, Zach, what's on your mind?
I was just calling, Adam was talking about rural organizing and rural power building and what's going on in Walker County with the Cagle campaign, with Ryan Cagle's campaign. I think is kind of an example of that in the sense that I'm the campaign manager for the campaign. We don't have money for polling. We don't have money for advertising. We don't have money for anything. We're basically just using social media. And, person after person is coming in and saying that they're Republicans, but they're going to vote Democrat because Ryan gives them hope. And I think that I think we need a narrative of hope for our rural areas and even our urban areas, something that everybody can get behind, that's simple and straightforward. And I think we can build that solidarity and rural power.
Zach, appreciate the call. Thanks for that. The Cagle campaign looks really interesting. We did have Cagle on the show a couple of weeks back, and I do think that there is something to the idea about giving hope to folks is a really good way to kind of convincing people that a better world is possible is really the key. And so how do you do that? But if you're able to convince people that a better world is possible, you can build support and you can build power, I think. And I think that we're seeing something like that happening right now in New York City with Zohran Mamdani, a DSA candidate for mayor, who is surging, who is now only single digits behind Andrew Cuomo in the race for mayor. And so we're going to be talking to actually the co-chair of DSA next week on the show, the co-chair of DSA nationally. And we're going to be talking to him about the Zohran campaign in New York and what it would mean in the South and for unions nationwide to have a strong pro-worker governor in New York City, what that could mean for the rest of us. So yeah, appreciate the call, Zach.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.
Which side